You're listening to Coffee, Chaos, and ProdSec. I'm Kurt Hendel, a developer turned defender who maps attack paths before breakfast and has zero patience for compliance theater. With me is Cameron Walters, the AppSec and DevSecOps builder who builds guardrails so good that developers barely notice they're there. We're cutting through the noise so you don't have to. And today, we've got Jenn Gile in the chat. Jen, welcome. Thanks for joining us. And for those who don't already know you, tell everyone a bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I am co-founder of Open Source Malware, which is a community-driven threat intelligence platform for malicious open source components. Think NPM packages, all that junk that came out of ClawHub, OpenClaw, whatever. That's what we specialize in. In terms of other stuff I do outside of my day job, I'm an advisor at Endor Labs. I'm on staff at the best security conference besides Seattle. And I'm on the board of a nonprofit called Second Cycle that does cycling advocacy work in Tacoma, Washington. So busy.
Sounds like it.
Amazing. Yeah, I got to meet you at B-Side Seattle, which was great. We're basically neighbors because I'm in the Seattle area. You're in the Seattle area. We're just kind of far apart because it's huge. But before we get this party started, if you enjoy the podcast, give us a like, subscribe, follow, 5 stars, or as Cameron coined our favorite term, smash the smash. Whatever your favorite platform's button says. Find us on LinkedIn. We like to chat with people, connect with us. And we actually just launched a Slack and Discord community. So come join us, chat with us outside of the podcast. We'll look forward to seeing more of you there. So grab your coffee. Now let's get into it. And I think, Jen, you already kind of gave the preview. People can probably figure out what we're talking about today based on why you're here. So we're talking about malware.
We're talking about malware, not just any malware, but malware in the supply chain.
It's an exciting topic. So, and something that definitely needs to happen. As I think we're going to get into it, and before we were, bantering about this, there's a big problem and not many solutions for it. So,
it's putting it lightly.
Definitely. But the most important problem is, what coffee is everybody drinking? Who wants to go first?
Well,
I'm happy to go first.
Let's be good hosts.
What do you got?
I made myself a little cappuccino. I have some frothed oat milk, a little espresso in there.
You have froth?
Nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I got a little frother, and I found my oat milk, Oatly, by the way.
Okay.
That was a pretty good foam. It's hard to find an oat milk that foams well.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's practically impossible. I drink a lot of oat or almond milk, and they don't froth well.
You have to add some kind of oil to it, which I kind of just pretend is not there. But it's the fat content in milk that makes it froth, so they have to do something similar with the nut milks.
Okay.
Or grain oats alternative milk.
Pro tip for all the coffee drinkers out there that like oat milk. I personally tend to stay away from it. But
yeah, we've all got our own special preferences, huh?
Special blend. I typically drink coffee black, or I like a latte every day. But I've got, what is it, Cafe Brit. It's
those new beans?
A dark roast. New beans. Yeah. It's a dark roast. It's actually courtesy of a couple of our friends, Duncan and Alop. Those guys over at Sweet Security sent us some coffee. So thank you guys. It's delicious, and that's what I'm drinking today.
I totally forgot to make some of that coffee because they gave some to me too. But today I am drinking. I had to just because it was quick, and I saw
Mr. Brown.
Nope, it's Rainbow Boss. It's Rainbow Boss. Right. So my wife's favorite, and I like it a lot. It's a good little can. So delicious. It's got a good flavor, and it's quick and easy. But I meant to brew some of the coffee they gave us and put some of the vanilla drops in.
You're up next week. Mine might be gone by then.
Yeah, I gotta do that.
Believe it or not, it's only my third coffee today.
Third coffee. And it's noon.
Yeah, I mean, it's, that's a respectable time. It's Friday. We're all kind of mentally done.
Yeah. I'm uh,
A little fried.
I'm off today, so I'm surprised it's not 4 or 5 because I like my coffee and I'm
Oh,
not stuck at my desk on meetings all day.
wow. Tomorrow's what? Your birthday?
Yes, sir.
Ooh, happy early birthday. Do you have anything fun coming up?
We're celebrating on the podcast now. No,
Yeah.
I'm hanging out. I forget who I was talking to. I think it was yesterday, but um when growing up, you always ask dad, like, what do you want for your birthday? And he was just like, peace and quiet. Like, I get it now.
Okay. All right, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. You're at least gonna
Is
go out
that
to
the
dinner,
moment you
right?
realized you've become an adult?
Yeah. We're going to a nice dinner next week because the place we like to go to celebrate here didn't have any openings tomorrow, so we're going to do it next weekend. It'll be fun because, like I tell my team, I tell everyone, the best things in life are good food, good drinks, and good people. So I'm going to have all of that next weekend.
Love it.
Nice. All right. All right. Well, malware. Where do you guys want to start?
I
Oh,
think we should start with the news, right?
Yeah.
what's
What do
happening
you?
this week?
What's
Not
happening this
RSA.
week?
Yeah,
So, for
nothing,
future
right?
people, whenever it is you end up listening to this, I just got back from RSA and B-side San Francisco, and a lot of the security world was there, and the attackers knew it.
Mm.
That's my theory, at least. But just a little over a week ago, I got a message from my co-founder, Paul McCarty, and it was like this one line and it said, "Ouch, Trivy compromised." And I was like, uh, looked into it, and it turned out that Trivy had been poisoned, goodness words, um, using a stolen pack. And that kind of kicked off a chain of events that hit us while we were all at these conferences the last few days. Trivy is owned by Aqua. So Aqua got hit immediately after Trivy. Checkmarks got hit. A little tiny light LLM got hijacked, a little account takeover. And then, this morning, as soon as I got back from my morning bike ride, I opened up the, feed and I was like, please, please, please don't let there be anything. And alas, I was an optimist. Telnix got popped, and that they're a user of light LLM. So it's kind of just rolling from shop to shop. The threat actors are called TeamPCP, and they're somewhat pejoratively referred to in the security research industry as a bunch of kids. They're not a terribly sophisticated threat actor group. This is not DPRK, North Korea. This is some younger people who are opportunistic. And what this campaign has really been showing is that they've evolved in sophistication with these attacks. And we can make some very educated assumptions that the evolution was fueled by AI making it easier to find these exploits and create, the next step in the chain. The token that was kicked everything off, that had been stolen weeks ago. This was not a recent theft, but they got a hold of the token and they probably took some time to think about what they would do and think about their timing. And it's been a stressful few days for everyone, from the vendors who got hit, the vendors who probably are consuming those products, the security researchers, not just at those places, but all over the industry, anybody who's using those. I talked to a friend while I was at RSA who was late to our meeting because he was furiously making sure that Light LLM wasn't hanging out in any of their dependencies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, there's
We
nobody.
That was
Cameron
me
and I
this
were doing
week.
the same thing
Was that
earlier
you?
this
It was
week.
like 9:30 at night, and I was like still going through trying to figure out, all right, are we
Yep.
good? Are we good? Are we good? Should we still alert all the devs? Right? Should we let
Yeah.
just
The
be just in
second
case?
Yeah, I had
was
one of the other groups that I'm in, Absolute AppSec, somebody asked about halfway through the week. So, is it time yet to turn back on Light LLM? Like, is it safe to start consuming it again? And here's what I'm going to say. I think Light LLM is giving a master class right now in how to handle a situation like this. They got out in front of it really fast. They've been really communicative on their LinkedIn, both the founder or the CEO as well as the company. They've already done a security town hall. They have written a retrospective. They've committed to hiring two different headcount who would help both in the DevOps and the security side. Um, the way they're handling it is incredible.
Yeah.
I think they were
Yeah.
pretty quick. They engaged Mandiant, right?
Yep. And, who knows what was going on behind the scenes if someone reached out and made an offer of help. That's pretty common in this community to say, hey, you're
Right.
small, you don't have the staff. I looked them up on LinkedIn just to kind of get an idea of how big they are, what their staff size is. And they're small. LinkedIn shows that they're a sub 10 employee company. You can't expect that kind of an operation to have the security expertise that's in bigger companies, let alone in this little like podcast room right now. Any of the three of us probably have more knowledge about it than this poor small company. But yeah, they're handling it really, really well.
I mean, transparency and kind of that always goes leaps and bounds in these kind of situations, which I think a lot of, I don't know, I think there's a stigma in the company or in the world that I've seen in the past, right? That's why I think a lot of compliance frameworks are requiring companies to come forward within X amount of time rather than trying to sweep it under the rug. So for them to, be a small shop and be like, hey guys, we're popped, we're doing our best, here's everything that's happening, right? And it goes leaps and bounds.
I went to a panel while I was at RSA of people talking about, things you can do to kind of get into more leadership roles in security. And one of the CISOs who was interviewed, she said, more and more, because she's in the market right now, she's getting asked, tell me about a time you led through a breach. They want to know what your experience is with these kind of issues. And yeah, keeping it secret, pretending it didn't happen, business as usual. The other vendors who got hit, they're not handling it in the same way. There's no public transparency on their social media. We're not hearing about how they're taking their own security seriously. And candidly, if I were in the market for any of those tools right now, I would go look somewhere else. Not because they got hit, but because they're failing to be communicative.
Yeah.
And you're hitting on an important thing, which is the transparency builds trust, right? Like whether you're in security or leadership or what have you, being direct, being open, it builds trust.
It does. And we're in environments now where there's not an expectation of zero risk. None of our jobs are to eliminate all risk from software production. That's not realistic. It's not feasible. And so we all know the risk is there. It's how you handle it that matters.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's really making it more difficult for the bad actors. It's not about preventing it outright every time now. It's making it more difficult, slow them down, contain it, and then stop it. Right. Which is exactly what we've seen happen with at least light LLM. I think I was in a conversation where people said, "Hey, maybe we shouldn't use that product." And it's like, well, we're not using the compromised version, by the way. Like we're following the advice that experts like yourself give in the industry to not adopt the newest package immediately, have that cooling off period. And so it's like, well, if we're not compromised and we know it, and then we see them handle it within 24 hours, like I feel pretty good about working with them versus somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. And with this latest campaign, we're seeing, there's multiple account takeovers, is what's happened, where malicious actors are taking the opportunity to exploit the trust that users have in the products, the genuine products that they're using, exploit that trust and exploit the probability that they're not using uh, software engineering best practices or software security best practices. And, we saw that with light LLM users. We saw that with Trivia users, where there there's no one silver bullet, but doing things like pinning versions, using cooldown periods, it makes a difference. And these are small changes. Now, is that the only thing you can do and should do to prevent consuming malicious code? No, but it's pretty um, uh, effective, and it would have helped a lot of people in this week.
Well, there's a lot of OSS, third-party libraries and things that we use that have been popped, right?
Yeah.
Just because these are just the ones that are in the news and are forefront today. From my understanding, like Log4j is still in use, not the vulnerable versions, but there are still people who use the
Hopefully
patched
not.
and fixed versions. Yeah, fingers crossed. I mean, that's not true. I think there's a website or a report out there still saying that like 40% or 30% of like detections still use it, and assume every now and then we find it transitive dependencies that also include it and nobody upgrades. It's a whole nother problem. But I don't think you can have that kind of mentality of, hey, we can't use something because it was popped. It's how did they respond? What was the quickness? What was the, what are the next steps? How are they going to prevent this issue from moving forward? Those are the things I look for, and something I would use in the future or keep using. That's what the
Yeah,
the question
exactly.
is.
Looking for those retrospectives when NX got popped last year in that chain of account takeovers.
Mhm.
One of the things they did was publish a very thorough retrospective about what happened and what they had done wrong and what they were changing. And to your point, Cam, like look for those kind of signals when you're evaluating products, and don't be afraid to use a vendor who's been popped, because frankly, they've probably all
Yeah,
had some kind of something. Maybe they didn't explicitly get attacked by a threat actor, but they certainly all have vulnerabilities in their code.
exactly. Yeah, I was gonna say that because there was, what was it? We had absolute AppSec on here just a couple weeks ago, and I was saying the same thing to them, that like we're all shipping, everybody's shipping code with vulnerabilities. Like literally everybody's shipping code with vulnerabilities that you know of or you don't know. But
Mhm.
one way or another, no one's shipping 100% secure, perfect primo code bases with zero vulns out there. We're all just plugging holes, and hopefully the holes don't line up to where it causes something. So you can't have that kind of, absolute mentality. You have to be critically thinking about how you manage your OSS. Um, how
Well, and I want
you,
to call out one of the comments that was made on social media by a very well known person. And I'm curious what you two think about it. But the comment was, the attacks that happened this week. Well, this is why we should stop using open source.
oh,
I see
Shots
the head
fired.
shaking.
Jeez.
Okay, thank you.
that's a that's
Yeah.
a that's a
Like,
hard take.
That's a hard take. I think the
It's
follow on
bananas.
to that was, now that we have AI, we don't need open source. And it's like, well, let's rewind. What was that AI
Mm,
trained on? Oh,
open
right,
source.
open
yeah.
Yeah.
source. Yeah,
Yeah, that's part of maybe why it's not so great. I
yeah.
don't. I'm in the dual camp there. I'm in the dual camp. I can see why like you would not want to use OSS with AI, or what I would think. I wouldn't, if I had the absolute hat on, I'd be like, yeah, we don't need it anymore. But at the same time, there are like libraries out there that have been hardened. They're extremely efficient, especially like the compression and crypto libraries and a lot of these things that should be out there and everyone should use and everyone should be reviewing. And that's what makes it so secure, and it makes it easy for companies like startups to get off the ground and do what they got to do. But there is a question that should be added every time you include a library, which a lot of times, at least in my experience in industry, is there is no question. Should I use this? Do I need this? A
Yeah, the
lot of people
people I
just
know
grab
who
like
are
one
like
module,
really
right?
savvy with product security, they're going back and they're saying, "Oh, well, this is only 10 lines of code. Like,
Yeah.
do we need this
Do we need
library?
it? Yeah.
Can we remove it and write that ourselves?"
Yeah. Was it like Logdash or I can't remember the exact library. There's one of them that just has a massive amount of little functions that everyone uses, and it's like 3 MB or something to pull in, and it's like, why do you need that for like, yeah, 10 lines, 15 lines? That's the question we should be asking. We always go to one question, I feel, as an industry is, are you on the latest version, or does it have known vulnerabilities on that latest version, or is it the license? Can we use it for the license, right? And then
Mhm.
that's where it's kind of stops. The reputation is only starting to come out. We should be looking at these libraries and being like, hey, there's only one reputable person on there, right? Or have some kind of scorecard designating in that direction, but doing more due diligence on our third party libraries and what we're using. The hardest problem is transitive dependencies, right? You bring in any third party libraries and boom, now you have, you pull one thing in and you have 50 other things.
JavaScript brings all its friends.
Yeah. You download, you're like, I'm gonna download this one thing, boom, 30,000 libraries. And you're like,
Well,
how
here's
did
what I'm
one?
seeing, having worked in the application security space, is there are definitely people who are pushing for that, but it tends to be viewed more as a security
Mhm.
gate rather than a development best practice. Now, I think there is the potential with AI and with the right data and context fed into it to kind of start to get your, AI code assistant to write cleaner code from the start to help, balance those uh, decisions that the developers would ideally be making. I think with skills, we have an opportunity to start priming the LLM to make better choices about dependencies so that we're not waiting until that code ends up at merge or even later, frankly, to be like, hey, maybe don't use this. Um, but we're not there yet. I've seen a lot of research about the ability of LLMs to pull in clean dependencies, whether
Yeah.
that's vulnerability free, whether that's malware free. When I was with Endor, we did some research that showed 4 out of 5 dependencies were either had vulnerabilities or were completely hallucinated, which is horrifying.
What does that mean?
And
Oh, you mean like the AI pulled it in and it's
the
like,
AI made it
just
up,
Didn't
completely
really.
random. Yeah.
which
Okay.
opens us up to a whole nother category of risk called slop
Yeah.
squatting.
Yeah. Squat squatting.
Um,
Yeah.
but a friend of mine who is in a very software forward organization has said, he's seen their LLMs repeatedly try to pull in malware. And I think this is maybe a good opportunity to talk about why we need to treat malware differently from other software dependency risks. You have your risks of vulnerabilities. Cam, like you said, you've got your risk if it's a single maintainer or they're not keeping up to date. Like those are all legitimate risks that have what I would call hypothetical future pain.
Yeah.
Pulling in a single maintainer dependency now could mean in the future it's not maintained, or pulling in something with a CVE now could mean you get popped in the future. Malware is different. Malware is written explicitly to hurt you. And so, where I think there's been some challenge in the industry is in lumping those categories together. You need different strategies to prevent the consumption of malware. You need different strategies to remediate it. Uh, the atomic unit remains code, but that's about all they have in common.
Well, there's different expertises and understanding the problem at hand. And as you, one thing I want to say about that single maintainer, that is prime for what we're seeing today.
Oh,
That one
absolutely.
maintainer maybe hands it off to somebody else that has been malicious the whole time, and they're just waiting and biting to, oh, now I've got it. All right, now I'm going to push this out, or something along those lines. But as a broader scope, there's no like one team that owns when this incident hits your team, right? Like we were just talking about earlier, when I was working on this just this week, it wasn't just AppSec or just working on the problem. I had to talk with my SOC team. I had to talk with my security and architecture team. I had to talk with my developer team. I had to talk with my cloud ops team, and then we had to engage with risk, right? Like, so there's all these other teams that are evaluating the supply chain level to our own exposure to our vendors and figuring out all those different things. It's not like a common CVE, right? A CVE coming in from a library it's a very straightforward problem. It's, hey, this library, it's got a CVE. All right. Very different.
And
Oh,
the CVE is not exploitable unless you're actually using the library, right?
Yeah.
With supply chain malware, very often you don't have to take any kind of an action for it to trigger a payload.
Yep.
In NPM, a lot of it can be linked to lifecycle scripts. The attacks that we saw happen in this last week, many of the vulnerable versions were taken down very quickly, within hours of being published. But they're pulled into your pipelines because you're, not pinning versions. And the next thing you know, you've consumed it. And so, yeah, there's a role that application security plays in detecting, do we have this in our app right now? Or, uh, some kind of dependency hygiene out front where you're looking to see, hey, before we merge this, let's prevent it. But the reality is by the time AppSec scans some code that already contains it, the payload probably has already triggered.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's
I
it's
think
like O-Day at that point.
the timing of these are different too. So like we talk about vulnerabilities, it's like that it's sitting there. It might be exploitable, it may not. Maybe you chain a few of them together. It takes an attacker figuring that out and having it loaded in memory and executed. Malware, like you just said, it could be in the install scripts or whatever. It executes immediately and it happens immediately. It's not
And it doesn't
it's
have to be
lying
in
in
the
wait.
application for it to happen.
Right. It
It's
could be a
VS Code
developer's laptop.
extensions.
It could be in your CI/CD pipeline. It's wherever that's pulled in, and so they're all trying to steal credentials because now they're exploiting the fact that we all want the shortest path. We want the easy button, right? So people pull in dependencies, they execute functions out of libraries so that you don't have to write them. Yes, AI may change that, it may not. Um, but then the attacker wants the easy button too. If they can get a credential, they can bypass your security controls because they look like a legitimate user now.
And
And
let's talk
so,
about who's doing this. We talked earlier about TeamPCP. They're fairly unsophisticated.
yep,
Some of the most prolific threat actors for malware are nation states. Something that we see at open source malware on a daily basis is North Korean threat actors. And let's just contextualize what this is doing for them. It's not just about them getting access to IP data, et cetera. Last year, North Korea was able to earn whatever the right word is, $2.2 billion
Yep.
from malware that had crypto stealers.
Yeah.
That's their
Crime pays.
GDP.
Crime
And
pays.
crime pays.
yeah,
Crime is currently paying. We're all in
it's
the wrong
bananas.
jobs.
Seriously. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but that's the thing about like this whole threat actor. I mean, if you verse what we're seeing from TMP and PCP is that the sophisticated actors are going to find a way. And as an industry that was traditionally like phishing, yes, maybe it was compromising or downloading and having the militia or the person download some malware, right? That was like the traditional way. But we've gotten, I think, hopefully, I fingers crossed. I don't know if you guys agree with me, but I think as an industry, we're a little better at that. We're doing a lot better at that. Our tools are better at that. People are getting better at that. The phishing campaigns, AI is throwing that on fire. Yes, 100%. But I've been talking about this, or at least I feel like I've been yelling. I haven't had much of a platform, but for years I've been like, this is the attack vector: dev systems, dependencies, and the pipeline. That's why I made the SPVS, the Secure Pipeline Verification Standard with OWASP, because and then people ask me all the time, they're like, why did you include the dev systems? And I was like, because that is a primo attack vector. Dev systems alone are usually given admin rights. They're told by whenever security is like, hey, we want to maybe remove admin rights, or not even remove it, just put a gate
Yeah.
so that you can do it. Massive uproar,
Non-starter,
right?
not allowed.
Non-starter.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not allowed. And you're like, okay, but these guys have access. They have a bunch of privileged credentials to all kinds of things. Sometimes, depending on your company, a lot of times they're like, yes, we have a separation between prod and dev, and the devs can't get access to dev. I would always say question that, because there's always loophole. Dev are smart people.
Well, and they don't need
smart cookies.
access to prod in order to be successful. Like, let's look at one of the campaigns from last year where the malware payload included a file that searched the local environment for locally installed AI tools. And if it found Claude, if it found two or three others, it would then throw some prompts at them to override their security controls and then use those to scrape everything else for secrets, because we are giving our LLMs, our agents, just insane permissions. And
Yeah.
so you're going to see that more and more. We saw that when ClawHub launched, 6 weeks ago or so.
Feels like
Within
a
2 days,
decade.
like
Yeah.
we found at this point, open source malware has found over 700 malicious skills in that
Hmm.
alone. I mean, that's a lot. They're seeing as an opportunity. And perhaps to tangent a little bit here, they're not just going after developers. If you go and you look at those skills, just even look at the names of them, you see skills for YouTube, you see skills for Excel, you see skills for all kinds of programs that if you think a little bit about who uses those, it's sales, it's marketing, it's finance, it's people who are not necessarily in the scope of application security, but who have, just like a developer, have access to credentials. They have Salesforce credentials. You can use that to get customer data. They have HubSpot credentials. They may have, access to systems in the company for, financial purposes. So I think we need to talk about where the responsibility sits. We talked about owning the fire extinguisher, but it's almost more like who's going to walk around the house before there's a fire and look for problems. I don't think it's AppSec's sole job to be doing that.
Yeah. The house
I don't think
analogies, love them.
anyone. Yeah, Cameron loves front doors and houses.
They always come out. Us security folks, we're
That's
always just like
We
your
always like
house.
the house.
The house and the
Yeah.
windows and the doors. It
Yeah.
just makes me giggle every time. What were you gonna say, Kirk?
I still deal in airplanes.
Yeah.
Gotta work on another one next week. Anyway, I think no one really has the full picture, and we've kind of hinted at that, of like AppSec's involved, engineering's involved, the SOC gets involved. I work with a ton of architects. We get involved. There's so many teams, and no one has single view of the whole world. And so, how does anyone own this problem? We run into this ownership problem all the time in security. And what it ends up being is we have to kind of crack the code on, not kind of, we have to crack the code on being collaborative and coming together to address this problem in full, which no one's
I
done yet.
think I think you're right. And I think where application security can make a big difference is educating other teams in the company who don't understand the problem.
Mhm.
I again just got back from a week in San Francisco for events, and I spoke with people who are not in AppSec, from CISO down to SOC, who have no idea that this is a problem, are completely unaware that it exists. And if we think about how could we proactively prevent it, sure, there are responsibilities in engineering and AppSec around having tools to scan and look for malware, around cooldown periods and pinning. But there's also, let's pretend you're in a really large company where there's every role is fully filled, and we'll go to small companies from there. Perhaps you have someone who works in cyber threat intelligence, right? And their job is to be looking outward at the industry and saying, where will the problems be? What are the trends? And so, their responsibility, for example, in this case, would be to say, hey, you guys, this is actually a really big issue. Code is being targeted. We need a plan for it. This is what the patterns look like. Then that might trickle down to your threat hunting team. And your threat hunting team is going to be looking more specifically in your organization. Where do we have risks? Something that we can see at open source malware is early signs that malware is coming before it's ever published. There are indicators around GitHub that if you know what you're looking for, you can see, oh, that GitHub repository has been compromised. Anything that gets published from it is going to be dangerous. So imagine if you can block earlier than the package as the unit.
Mhm.
They're going to be looking around and, they might find something in your environment and they might say, we've already consumed this. So that's going to go over to your SOC, your incident response, who need to understand uh, what's the payload do? What are the indicators of compromise? Who's the threat actor? what's the malware going to actually do next? Because there's a big difference, when you know who the threat actor is between, your neighbor's kid in the basement and North Korea.
Yeah.
And if you know who the threat actor is, you can make some educated assumptions about, okay, the payload is going to go in these chain of events. We should expect, it looks like only the second stage is loaded. The info stealer hasn't exfiltrated yet. Here's where we stop it. And then coming back around to application security, because as some of the research that I did at Endor showed, SOC and incident response have absolutely no visibility into the controls that are going on the AppSec side.
Yeah. Well, and I would say the expertise too.
Yeah.
The amount of times I've worked with SOC around an AppSec kind of level vulnerability, especially now that devs, systems, and pipelines are being targeted, they just don't even understand the technologies that are commonly used there. Like, I had to explain to them that, hey, most pipelines have hard coded credentials essentially in plain text. They're You go to GitHub, you go to Jenkins, like the thing you use, it obfuscates it for us, but it's plain text. They're not just in time. They're most of the time people just drop it in there and they're global creds that are used and everybody's got them. And they're like, wait, we have to check for those things. So I was like, yeah, you got to check for that. Same with the devs. The devs are probably going to have an environment file, and the environment file may have a bunch of creds in there that they hard coded to make it easier to do their testing or connectivity or XYZ. And they're like, oh, that's not part of our normal, IR response. And so I've had to work with the AppSec or the SOC teams to build out a dev or pipeline like incident response plan. And 99% of the time, I've seen it. AppSec has had to own it because we just are the experts. And then SOC is traditionally taught in the corporate level.
Yeah.
Right? The corporate level.
Well, and you think about the
context.
backgrounds that those people tend to come from. We're seeing more people in product and application security with development backgrounds. You don't tend to see that as much in other parts of security. So they don't have that like lived experience of what it's like to ship code.
So
I think too, like they're the responders. They're not familiar with the technologies. They don't generally have access to those things to respond, and
true.
so they don't have access to the people who have access to those things. And so, what's the easy path? We talked about this before already, but it's AppSec. AppSec knows the right team to go engage to fix whatever's happening in the pipeline or stop it or whatever it is. So now AppSec is now part of the response and has to go and sort it out and then say, hey, go rotate your creds because they were clearly stolen and being exploited and
Mm.
the rest of it.
Well, and
So it's
I
like
think
there's
this
this
comes down to
chain.
like how mature is your AppSec program, right? There are the programs that have a tremendous amount of noise, poor
Yeah.
visibility into what dependencies are even being used. A friend of mine at a large company during the Shai Hulud attack last year, they had no way to block the packages that came out of Shai Hulud. They didn't have any kind of a policy management. And so they had to shut down access to NPM for like 6 weeks. On the other end, you have people who are more mature, have reduced the noise in their alerts, and can pinpoint in an SBOM, oh, we're using it over here, but we're not using that version. Cool, we're fine. It's all, what is it, like a snake eating its tail or something? It's all connected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I would say that are we kind of leading towards where AppSec is going to be 27 or 24 by 7? Because I don't know if I want to be in
Gosh,
that
I hope
state.
not.
Like, is that what
The
I'm
goal is
hearing
never
here?
to be. You build the things you do to avoid that, though. Like
Yeah, but
if we
SOC's
do
on
these,
24/7 monitoring risk, and they have to have somebody on board. That's what I'm hearing you guys are saying, and that's giving me a little bit of heartburn.
it's
Am I
let's
going to be
face it,
working 24/7 now?
we
Yeah,
all
well, I
work in
mean, I
security.
wanna say
So yeah,
no, but also I know a lot of people who were dealing with incident response this week because they're the ones who have access to the systems, the dashboards, the visibility. So they may not be, doing the IR job, but yeah, they're getting called in for it.
I mean, I was working on it till 9:30, so definitely well out of my scope of hours.
Yeah.
it's kind of the nature of what we do, though. Like someone has to be there to bring the expertise and respond. Because, like, when I looked at my phone on an off chance and saw a message about like, "Hey, is there light LLM?" and I was like, "Oh, great." So of course the answer is like, yes, let me go get my laptop. And then Cameron pops up like logging in, seeing this unfold in real time. And you bring the different expertise together. And I mean, it took minutes for us to figure out like, hey, we're very likely okay. Now let's turn it over to the SOC to monitor the situation and make sure that nothing is out of the norm. And I think that's one of the points we're eventually going to get to, but I'm going to bring it up now is looking for things that are out of the norm. Don't depend on signatures and that old school sort of stuff. We've found obviously that behavioral analysis is a big component in detecting that something's off. And so you should probably go look into it and do something about it.
Yeah, it may sound slightly unbelievable, but a developer machine running kind of slowly, behaving strangely, like
Well,
rewind to when we
download
all
more RAM.
probably downloaded our first
Yeah.
malware.
Go download more RAM.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll
Click on
speed
that
it up.
button.
That's so fun. And we're back to like the 90s where you're
I
like,
think we might be.
my computer's
The 90s
moving really
fashion's
slow.
back.
Yeah.
Why not 90s malware?
Oh,
But I mean,
no.
beyond that, like Shai Hulud, the second wave included a kill switch that would wipe your home directory when an auth failure was detected. I
Yeah.
mean, let's talk about behavior. Like, that's a behavior you will probably notice happening.
Well, in Shai Hulud, like it grabbed a truffle hog, right, and was scraping
Yep.
credentials and then packaging it. And then there was it TJ Actions? TJ Actions did the same thing, confiscated it in the logs and hid it. But all these things, from what my research and understood, Jen, correct me if I'm wrong here, but they scraped a ton of credentials and only used a handful, right?
So
Literally
far.
only a handful. And so, like, are they sitting on these creds? Do people even know that? Like, the question, if you guys know that you were vulnerable, did you rotate every single cred, or did you guys only
So I
rotate a
saw
handful?
some research that was published within 3 days of the second Shai Hulud wave that was showing 30,000 compromised packages and valid credentials found days later. Have they all gotten rotated? Probably not. The pat that was stolen to exploit Trivy, that has been out on the internet since I think
I'm
2022 or 23, like multiple years. Yeah, they're gonna go and use what they can. And for all we know, they've used a lot of them already, and either disclosures haven't happened because people don't know they've been compromised. The access was quiet enough that they don't know what data has been taken. We may never know how bad it is, but every time we see another one of these campaigns, we can speculate some connection.
Well, I like Log4j hit us, right? And this is the thing that really frustrates me with every single one of these things. Log4j was what, now 4 years ago, 5-6 years ago now, and it still feels like the maturity of AppSec programs, ProdSec, just our industry in general around these attack vectors has not changed. I look at SCA vendors that's traditionally, the first line of defense for this is obviously not equipped for this, right? We talked about it. There's NVD versus, what is it, OSV databases, completely separate, different looking things, not often connected. So is the expectation that SCA vendors need to start bundling in more malware specific signatures or detection tools?
We're definitely seeing a lot of that in the last. So I'll rewind. I went to work for Endor Labs in late 2023. Endor had a malware detection component. There were a couple other vendors at the time who had it, and nobody wanted it. There were no prospects that said, we're buying you because we need malware detection.
And today it's like,
oh my
selling like
gosh, it has
hotcakes.
so changed. There's
Yeah.
so much competition in application security to kind of, win that space. Here's what I think. A lot of data in security is proprietary. And that's the moat that vendors create for themselves to edge out their competition. Feed A versus feed B versus feed C, who will catch more? With malware, catching the most doesn't equal good.
Mm.
How do you know? Just like with vulnerabilities, there are false positives. There are versions that show malicious behavior but are not malicious. They could be, researchers messing around, somebody who just did something kind of dumb. There are things that you can do as an engineer that are not good software engineering practices that can look malicious. And so, like, as you're thinking about what tool can I use to start to catch this early, I mean, I would encourage, don't get fooled by somebody saying we, catch in number per day, because that number per day probably doesn't actually exist in the world. Um, the way that my company is approaching this differently is offering a free feed that will always be free, that has a listing of all the malicious versions that we've found. And we don't believe in gating that. We don't
Mm.
think that's helping the industry move forward. Sure, we'll build a commercial product that relates to it, but the free feed is there for anybody to use it. You call it by API and you can check and see if you're consuming something bad. Um, the other thing, as people are thinking about this, is understanding what the feed is looking for. Just like with SCA, you brought up, Cam, you need an SCA tool that covers your ecosystem. You could have the best SCA tool, but if it doesn't cover, I don't know, Ruby, and you need Ruby, then it's not the best for you. So the same
Yeah.
thing with the malware feed or feeds. Look and see what's your biggest gaps. What are you not getting served by other tools that you're using? AppSec focuses on those scanners, but data is coming into your threat intelligence side of the business that may be coming from like Mandiant or Virus Total, or any of those other vendors. So you kind of like start to look for the diff, right?
Mhm.
Where's the gap? Where am I not covered? It's probably going to be around NPM packages, VS Code extensions.
Oof.
Uh,
Oh no. Don't say those.
did I trigger you?
Extensions and plugins are just I was, oof,
Free for all.
yeah, because like they're and then like it's a pain to actually manage those. Oh,
Right. How do you know what people are using?
yeah,
How
it
do you?
like the level, the tool that you have to scan and detect that. I don't know of many tools that do that well, that can even
Yeah, and
detect
I
what
mean, they
the
probably
ones.
all require an agent on the developer machine,
Agent
which
on the
is
so
another
another thing that
hurdle.
slows it down. Yeah, an
You
agent,
don't
right?
have
Agent
enough of
sprawl.
those.
Yeah. I mean, we're all starting. Everyone's cool with
We already
50
got like
different
6 of
agents.
them, so
Why not join the party?
Another
yeah,
one, just pile it on. Oh
yeah.
yeah, sorry, that one triggering, because that's a huge problem too, right? We're starting to see a lot of open source plugins, and we've already seen that for a long time. Skills is just like another.
Oh,
It's a
it's a mess.
different
Yeah.
Well,
iteration
I
of it,
think
right?
so. I think this is what attackers are doing, though, is they know how systems are built. They know how people operate. They're attacking trusted sources, burying malware in there because they know people are going to pull this stuff in because it's easy. And what does it do? Instead of like a phishing email targets one person, or if you target a whole company,
Yeah.
great, maybe you'll get one person. This open source malware is available to millions of pieces of technology, people, et cetera, at the same time. And so it's much more likely you're going to get a hit. You're going to
This
land,
is
and you're
where
going
that
to get
whole
multiple
supply
people.
chain concept is coming into play,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
You may
Yeah.
not be targeted. You may not be the one consuming malware, but then your vendor gets hit.
Right.
And unfortunately, I saw a case about a month ago where a security vendor did consume malware, eventually took it out, but they didn't disclose it to their customers. And the reason I know that is because we
Irresponsible.
discovered it in a customer. We discovered some malware that was specific to one of their customers. And when they traced it back, they learned that it had come from one of their vendors who knew that it was there and didn't tell them.
Wow. Well, I always say
Insane.
it's the watering hole attack of today, right? Like I always think back of when I was growing
Exactly.
up and learning about attack vectors, and they were like form attacks, right? I would go on local forums, everyone's chatting, and drop a link, and then boom, you compromise a bunch of people with malware. For an attacker, this is the most bang for your buck again, right? State
Yep.
actors are the ones that will target a specific company and build a specific payload and maybe execute some, specific 0 days they bought somewhere or found themselves. this is like, you compromise one person, boom, steal their creds, phishing, right? Who was it that was just a couple weeks ago that was phished, and he reported very quick, like, hey guys, I got phished. And on his thing, and it's like, hey, the malicious packages up there are or the package up there are malicious. Like, boom, now you've compromised so many different companies. And then with transitive dependencies on top of that, how many of them do we know? I don't know. Also, I was just also think of was it XE Utils, that little library that's a compression
I was going to mention
library.
that earlier. You mentioned the single maintainer. That's how malware got that library.
Yeah, it's just one little, one person doing that, and it's you realize the chain of that, and you're like, holy crap, everybody's using all kinds of different stuff underneath the hood. We're all using similar sources, and so one library, maybe you upgrade or you have no upgrade path, and like, that's the scary thing that I'm really nervous about, is a third party, like some library gets compromised, it installs malware, but it's on a transitive dependency. And so, but that dependency you're using is critical to your company's app. And you're like, how do I rip this thing out? What are the solutions?
Well, so we've been talking a lot about the account takeover style of malware, which candidly is in the minority of what's out there for supply chain malware. Most malware is novel. Most of it's being published as if it was a legitimate package. In fact, what we often see is a functional piece of code. It does the thing that the
Trojan horse, right?
developer says that it does. And they've gotten very smart to the way, again, going back to how our programs work, they don't put the malware in version 1 or 1.1 or 1.5. They wait at least 5 versions often, and they insert it later.
Build the
We had
customer
somebody,
base.
yeah, it is a functional thing. We had someone report a TensorFlow dependency to our platform a couple weeks ago that had been up and running for 4 years. It does the thing that it says, and also has a little crypto stealer in it that hadn't gotten caught. So there's a lot of kind of social engineering happening there of like, ooh, dangle this thing. And there's been a tremendously successful campaign against developers called Contagious Interview. Have you heard of Contagious Interview?
No, I might have heard it, but I've never heard of that term.
It's not the kind you want.
Well, yeah, I don't want anything called contagious.
No, it doesn't sound good, does it? So the threat actor is targeting developers. They'll reach out to them on a platform that could include LinkedIn, or it can include like one of those Fiverr or Upwork or something. And they'll say, would like to consider you for this job. It pays, 350K. We just need you to do a coding assignment. Yes. They send you the repo, you fork the repo, and then, oh, dang it. That has malware in it. Crypto stealer steals a bunch of money. Yeah. But not only that, let's think about, job interviews and
the humans factor.
Yeah, you're probably doing it on your company laptop, right? So that malware is ending up on company machines and worming its way into the wider, ecosystem.
Yeah, I was watching Low Level. He had his YouTube video. I don't know if you guys watch him, but he's a YouTuber, cybersecurity YouTuber. He's great videos. He talked about this, and then on Primogen's podcast, The Stand Up, they talked about it too. And I was just, like, I think not even from the corporate side, think about the human factor of a developer. When you say you lost your job, you're doing whatever you got to do to get that interview. And if they say, hey, you got to go download this, right? And maybe you deal with crypto. And like what I'm seeing is, or what they were talking about for those ones is, they specifically put job postings for crypto jobs, because those are the high likelihood that those people have crypto wallets. And so then they're attacking people who are vulnerable. Man, that's just like, that is just brutal, like malicious. It's like going after like hospitals or your grandma. Like, come on.
That is DPRK that's behind that campaign. So, you can imagine what that money is going to go fund. It's terrible. Let's talk about what we can do to make it better.
Let's
end on a good note. There's a big education component. I think AppSec is generally misunderstood or poorly understood because it's so technical. I'd argue it's probably the most technical domain in security. And, your peers across the company, your leaders, they probably don't understand this space.
No, no. That's the hard
What
part
do
as
you
a
think
leader.
needs to be done?
I mean, it's education always, right? It's funny. I always come back to your talk at LastCon about selling your AppSec program, which is essentially educating people on what you do and then teaching them to enable them. So I kind of feel like that's what we have to do. It's about education. It's about letting people know, going on massive campaigns within your own company to educate folks. Hey, think twice. That's the first line. And then I would say from there, we got to talk with vendors and get better tooling in place because nobody can ever be everywhere at all times. So for me, I think it's a two-pronged approach. We got to start talking about tooling. We got to educate our internal cybersecurity leaders because you go to CISOs. I talk to CISOs about this and their eyes glaze over, right? I think you were just saying that one of your dinners, no, none of the CISOs put supply chain as a top level risk, and it's like, are you kidding? Like,
Not only that, but one of the CISOs said it was a solved problem, which was just disappointing to hear.
What a week to say that.
Right?
Yeah, there's not the
Well, I
time to
think a
say that.
lot of attention is on AI and the legitimate problems that come along with it. Non-human identity continues to be hot. Probably the most common new type of vendor that I saw on the RSA show floor was AI SOC companies.
Yep.
Not surprising.
A lot of attention and time is going over to that space. And that can mean smaller teams, that can mean smaller budgets. But this is one that I think, let's look at these companies that got compromised this week and make some assumptions about the real cost of having been hit.
I think focusing on, so you mentioned the AI SOC and how it's popular. Like, I have a problem with that because we're focusing on the response. We're basically
Mhm.
saying stuff's going wrong. Let's go make it more efficient to respond to it. Why don't you focus on preventing it? Because then you have less to go respond to. So we always talk about doing root cause analysis. Well, why don't you tackle the root of the problem, not like focus on fixing things in the runtime 300 times versus fixing it once in the code, right?
Yeah, I think if you're
Um,
really going to get serious about this, start threat modeling. Get
I do it all
your.
the time.
I don't. I believe you.
I don't do enough of it, according to Cameron. So he's
No,
going to
more
tell me to
planes.
do it. All right. Well, we'll get to there on Monday. How about that?
Jen, there's
Because
a
we're not
running
working.
joke that Kurt always does all his threat models to make them look like they're a plane.
My architecture diagrams are all shaped like planes.
Are they like Cessnas or jets?
It depends on the complexity of the system.
Sure.
I like planes. So I aspire to be a pilot someday. No, I'm kidding. But I think the other thing, going back to fixing things, because we could talk about me drawing planes all day. They're not very pretty, but hey, it works. You also mentioned NHI. That's another thing that's gotten super hot. And if we think about what's happening in these supply chain attacks, they're nabbing NHIs. They're
Oh, for
grabbing
sure.
secrets that give them access to things. They're grabbing identities. So protect your freaking secrets. Like,
Some of these
monitor that.
solutions are honestly not new or sophisticated. Like,
No.
stop hard coding your secrets, have, really robust tooling to look for it. This is now speaking of solved problems.
Well,
I
I
do
was about
think
to say, talk about a
yeah,
problem that's supposed to be solved.
this is one that I think we're doing pretty well if we actually implement it.
Yeah. If
Yeah.
you follow the common guidance that is, I'll say the dirty word, best practice, um, it's I mean that you get a lot of protection out of good hygiene when it comes to your secrets and identities, which that's what attackers are after because it's the easy button. If
You
you
know,
get a secret or identity, you get access, you bypass everything else. So maybe focus on protecting those things.
yeah, protect your secrets, pin your dependencies, use cooldown periods. One of the interesting things that came out of some research I did recently that we were talking about as we were prepping is there's actually a correlation between reducing your unused or unneeded dependency sprawl and your ability to respond faster in a supply chain incident.
Mhm.
Like,
Makes sense.
So
yeah,
I
reduce your
mean,
tech debt.
What you
Yeah.
just said is harden your system essentially.
Well,
I
tech
mean,
debt, security debt.
right. It's like remove things you don't need. That's what we call hardening in security.
Yeah.
So
These are
it's part of
not
it. It's not all of it.
mind-blowing things,
Yeah.
but it takes time. And, if you're being asked to look at other priorities, if your
Yeah.
KPIs live elsewhere, like I get it. It's a tough decision to make.
Well, security's always been that kind of competing path, right? I was just mentoring somebody and they're asking me like, why don't devs care about security? And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Whoever says devs don't care about
Lies.
security is not true. It's the incentives or the mentality that's within the culture that usually causes this, speed over secure path. And you have to advocate. That's like they want to go into AppSec and ProdSec, and I'm like, that's your job. 90% of your job is going to be advocating. You're going to be selling your program and teaching folks on how to critically think in the most effective way, and then getting higher level buy-in all the time to be like, hey, you need to allocate extra time to think about how can we reduce our dependencies? Ask these questions, ask these different things that go leaps and bounds in securing your environments. Again, that's what we've been doing for forever.
There's an interesting dichotomy where, Cam, I agree with you 10,000%. Like anyone who says developers don't care about security have never actually talked to a developer, perhaps.
I
And then
think
on
we're
the
all
other
former
side,
devs, right? Like, I think you're a former dev, aren't you?
I mean, I used to work at Nginx,
Okay.
very like involved in that community. On the other side of it, you've got incentives, you've got, what you're paid to pay attention to. There's competing priorities, and you have to think like, whose job is it to care? Whose job is it to, bring up these things? Well, it's security's job. When I talk with leaders, do interviews, I often say, why does your program exist? Why did your company decide to fund your program? And it usually comes down to either something to do with compliance or customer trust. Those are typically the reasons. And, wherever the money comes from, it is the reaction that I often get from security people is, Jen, how can I make developers care about this? My friend, you cannot. I'm not saying they don't. No developer says I would love for my stuff to fail. I would love for production to
Insecure perfection.
yeah, would love that. Would love for the app to crash because of something I did. I would love to consume malware and get like all my stuff stolen. No, they're not saying that. Um, but to the point that you were making, Cam, they're gold on speed, they're gold on producing, and anything that slows them down, unless they're already like really security curious or have had an experience, or perhaps they work at a security company, you tend to see a little bit more of that there.
Yep.
They don't have a compelling reason to have different behavior. And so you have to think about, what are they gold on and how can you speak to them in that language? And it'd be interesting to, perhaps another time talk about, how do you help them understand the impact of malware?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to put a button on this, and is it one thing that drives me crazy? I don't know if it does for you, but if you look at dev job postings, none of the job postings say write secure code.
Mm.
Or understand basic security, here to basic security controls or things. I've approached developer leaders to include that in there. I was like, you don't have to even interview against it. I just want it in the job posting so it's the front of mind as people are applying. And they're like, oh, look at this line. Okay, that's new, right? I've never seen that somewhere else. Wonder what that means. Let's just start getting people curious.
I'm going to tell you what I do see sometimes, and that is
I'm just waiting to say
things related to compliance.
Okay. I was like, I was, write insecure code. That's the other bullet.
Write insecure code. Please, make it terrible.
Meet our checkboxes.
Yeah. Oh God. No. Stop
Good
it.
times.
Yeah. All right. Any last
No
comments?
check
Anything?
boxes.
Where I get optimistic with this topic is, I think there are a lot of people talking about it. when my co-founder and I find evidence of something nefarious going on and report it directly to, whoever may have impact over it. We work with a cloud infrastructure provider and we're constantly sending them endpoints. We're like, hey, this is being used to deliver malware. And they take it seriously and they kill it right away. And when I see those kind of experiences of, people working across industry, people who are not getting paid more to do this thing, that makes me encouraged that this is a solvable problem.
We all know it's a solvable problem. It's just getting people behind it, right? And I
Yeah.
always think that anytime there is a chain of bad stuff happening, eventually it gets so bad that things have to change, right? And maybe we're not there yet. I really wish we were. But we're heading in that direction, right? All the data, I know I'm going to be publishing something on SPVS on like all the breaches I'm seeing and how it's just a hockey stick or logarithmic algorithm, line just going straight up, that this year is going to, double or triple what I calculated last year for supply chain, dev, tax. Eventually, it's going to get the noise of everybody, and everyone's going to be like, okay, we got to do something.
Fine, we hear you.
Yeah, finally, 4 or 5 years late, but at least we'll finally get there.
Yeah, I think we're probably going to have to see some more large exploits before we see change, and that stinks. But
Yeah.
uh, people
Love to
are
see a few of
encouraged
this year.
by seeing the bad.
Yep. It's still happening as we speak, and it's still early in the year. So that exponential growth in attacks, like Jen, I know your research has graphs that show from 2024 to 2025 that explosion of NPM malware, and it's only getting worse. And
Yeah, I mean,
so,
maybe this will come around to cyber insurers picking up on the trend and saying,
Oh
hey, you
no.
need to get this under control or your premiums are going to go up. Maybe that's how we drive some change. Because if you think about business decisions, it all comes down to money.
The cyber insurance always triggers me. So I was watching
yeah,
was it Robert Hanson's talk? I watch it like every year. He put up a talk at LastCon like 4 years ago, and it was talking about like cybersecurity is sick because the only thing that's really pushing the needle now is cyber insurance. And the fact that cyber insurers are saying, hey, your checkbox security, it sucks. You need to step it up. And if you don't want your premiums to go up, you're going to have to step it up. And I'm like, wow, we're going into a world where the insurance company is kind of becoming the good guy, at least in that respect. And I'm like, oh, that feels wrong. That
yeah,
just
that feels
feels
weird.
wrong. Feels
It
just
does, huh?
no, please no. Can we just do it, guys? Let's just all do better.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it the right way. Let's not check the boxes. Let's do it for the right reasons.
Maybe we need to go make friends with some of these people and find out, how are they talking about it? Maybe there's something we can learn from them other than threatening.
Yeah. True that. All right. I think we've beaten this one up enough. Any other things? Kurt, anything?
Don't download malware. That's all I got.
Solid. All right.
Make good choices.
Make good
Yes,
choices.
think about things before you act. How about that?
Very much. All right. Kurt, you want to take us out?
Oh man. Well, I think we already closed down the malware. Jen, thank you for joining us. It's always a pleasure. We're really happy that you brought this up, and it was not caused by Jen. For anyone thinking this was a nasty coincidence, she didn't. She's not Team PCP.
I'm
Um,
not. I don't get paid enough.
you might if you were,
That's
but who
true.
knows? Like, subscribe, follow, whatever the button says. Cameron, smash the smash. Find us on LinkedIn, chat with us. Again, we launched Slack and Discord this week, so come find us on there and chat with us outside of the episodes. And this is Coffee Chaos and ProdSec. We'll see you all next week.